So in this section I want to talk about web apps versus native apps. And by web app I mean something that's built with web standards like HTML and JavaScript and CSS that can be ran in a web browser versus native apps, which are mostly when you go to the App Store, most of those apps now at this time are native apps. They're written in iPhones, apps are written in Objective-C, and Androids are written in Java. So those are very high-level languages. It takes a lot more knowledge to build a native app. So let's get into this and see the pros and cons of each. So there is a large debate going on in the techie world for web apps versus native apps. The fact is there is a need for both, but web apps are quickly catching up because of features of HTML5, and frameworks like PhoneGap are allowing us to use web standards to create what seems to be a native app that can be in the App Store. People can purchase it. It can be installed. So this distinction between web and native has become very blurry, and it'll only get better for web apps. So, like I said, a web app usually runs in a web browser. On the iPhone, you have Safari. On an Android, you have Chrome. So you would have to type in the address of the website, which would be the application. But like I said, with PhoneGap and some other technologies, we can make what seems to be a native app with web standards. So web apps are written in specific programming languages like JavaScript and combined with markup language like HTML or XHTML, and they're styled with CSS. So what are native apps? A native app is an application that has been built for one platform. So like I said, Java would be for Android apps and Objective-C for iOS or iPhone apps. So let's talk about the advantages of web apps. The biggest advantage of a web app, is that it's cross-platform. A web app will typically work on an Android, an iPhone, a BlackBerry, an HP phone. It can work on any platform, as opposed to native apps that need to be specifically written in a certain language for each platform. Which, if you're a company and you want to purchase, you want to have a web developer build you a native iPhone app and a native Java app, that is going to be very, very expensive. Just because they have to build for each platform, and it takes a lot more knowledge to write applications in Java than it does to in HTML and JavaScript. They have the ability to be updated and maintained without the user having to distribute and install anything. So the user visits the app and it's automatically the latest version because the developer has updated it. But with native apps, you have to actually download and install every update, which can be a real pain. They're built with HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS, which is very easy compared to writing a program in Java or Objective-C. They run in a browser, so a native app you can't run in a browser. They can now look and run like native apps, thanks to frameworks like PhoneGap. They're much cheaper to build. If you're not a developer, if you're a company that wants to purchase an app or have it built for you, a web app is going to be extremely cheaper than a native app. And on top of that, it'll work on all platforms. No rules. So native apps have restrictions. Well, I should say the App Store has restrictions on native apps, especially the Apple App Store. So you have to kind of apply and go through a process. With web apps, the user can instantly access your application without any kind of restrictions. So we saw all the advantages of web apps. There are some advantages of native apps as well. So they're built for a single platform, which obviously can be a negative, but they're also able to take more advantage of the operating system because they're built for that certain platform. They can have quicker and easier access to hardware capabilities. They have the ability to use device-specific hardware, which I just said. They're App Store friendly. You can have a web app in any of the app stores, but it's just easier. The process is easier if it's a native app. Native apps can seem a little more professional, but that's not really an issue as frameworks like PhoneGap become more popular because the user can't really tell whether it's native or web. Before we could do that with PhoneGap, people would have to type in an internet address to go to the application, and obviously that is a little less professional than having an app in the App Store. Native apps can work offline, and many web apps cannot. So with native apps, you usually don't need an internet connection. With a lot of the web apps, you do, but not all of them. They can use device notification systems, so they can use those little alerts that pop up in your phone. But with PhoneGap, you can use that as well. So if you're using PhoneGap, basically all of these don't really matter because you can pretty much do the same thing. So that brings us to where PhoneGap comes in. It allows you to use HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript for cross-platform development, avoiding the platform's native language. So applications execute within a wrapper that are targeted to each platform, and they rely on AP bindings to access each device's sensors, data, and network status. With PhoneGap, you can access the camera of a phone, you can access the notification system, geolocation, pretty much everything. Your web apps can be packaged and distributed to app stores, which obviously is a big plus. Alright, so that's it for this section. Next we'll be talking about mobile HTML, JavaScript, and CSS.